Hey class, it's Mr. Jones again. I'm gonna read before hip hop was hip hop. For those of you who would rather listen to someone read it to you, um, and if you'd rather read to yourself, go ahead and do that. But I want to at least give you guys the opportunity. Um, all of this is just the introduction that was in the textbook about before hip hop was hip hop, and I just tapped it out. Just I'm still deciding on like if we're gonna do something with it later, but that's why I tapped it out. But you don't have to read it just yet. If you want to, go ahead. It's not long at all. Um, but I'm just gonna go straight into before hip hop was hip hop right here. Um, so before hip hop was hip hop is nonfiction. So that means it's real, and it's written by Rebecca Walker. If you ask most kids today about hip hop, they'll spit out the names of recording artists they see on TV: Eminem, P Diddy, J Lo, Beyonce. You can tell that this was written a long time ago. Well, I wouldn't say a long time ago, but it's not too recent. Um, they'll tell you about the songs they like and the clothes they want to buy. They'll tell you about the indisputable zones of hip hop like EO, East Orange, New Jersey, the ATL, Atlanta, Georgia, and the West Side, Los Angeles, California. Neighborhoods they feel they know because they've seen them in all the glossiest, flossiest music videos. You see how that's in quotations? That's probably a good indicator that's a slang word. So anytime you see a word in quotations, it's not always the case. Don't get me wrong, because there's some down here that might not be. Um, but a lot of times that indicates that it's a slang word. And that's what flossiest is right there, saying kind of the cool thing, the end thing. Hip hop is natural to these kids like air or water, just there, a part of the digital landscape that streams through their lives. I watch this cultural sea change with fascination. It astounds me that hip hop has grown into a global industry, a force that dominates youth culture from Paris to Prague, Tokyo to Timbuktu. I can't believe that in small all white towns like Lincoln, Nebraska, high school boys wear their clothes in the latest stilo pants, sagging off their waists, sports jerseys hanging to their knees, baseball hat cocked to one side. And again, latest stilo, that's probably another slang word, probably another slang word for style based off the context. Even in the pueblos of Mexico, where mariachi bands and old school crooners still roll, it is hip hop that sells cars, sodas, and children's toys on TV. The vast empire of hip hop amazes me because I knew hip hop before it was hip hop. I was there when it all began. Way back then, in what today's ninth graders might call the ancient 80s, there was no MTV or VH1. We found out about music by listening to the radio, flipping through the stacks at the record store, or buying mixtapes from local DJs at $2 a piece. Back then, we carried combs in our back pockets and clipped long strands of feathers to the belt loops of our designer jeans. Hmm, there's a fashion statement. We wore our names in cursive gold letters around our necks or in big brass letters on our belt buckles. We picked up words and invented them, calling something that we thought was really cool hot and something that had a whole lot of life death. So you see with the quotations again, slang words. We didn't know a whole we didn't know a whole new language was rolling off our tongues as we flipped English upside down and pulled some Spanish, and even a few words from African into our parlance. We didn't know that young people for years to come would recycle our fashions and sample the bass lines from our favorite tracks. We thought we were just being kids and expressing ourselves, showing the grown ups we were different from them in a way that was safe and fun. In fact, we were at the epicenter of one of America's most significant cultural revelations, making it happen. Who knew? Not me. When I moved from Washington, D.C. to the Bronx the summer before seventh grade, I had one box of records, mostly albums I'd ordered from the Columbia Record Club. In 1982, if you promised to buy a record a month for one whole year, the club sent you 8 records for a penny. I had Bruce Springsteen's The River, REO Speedwagon's The Letter, Belladonna by Stevie Nicks. I had Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin and the soundtrack from the movie Saturday Night Fever, which I played so many times. I thought my mother would go crazy from listening to me belt out all the lyrics with those lanky, swanky Bee Gees. Along with my albums, I had loads of 45s, what today we would call singles, little records with just two songs on them that I bought at the record store near my school for just $1 a piece. I had Shaka Khan's "I'm Every Woman" and Luther Vandross's "Never Too Loose." I had Michael Jackson's "Rock With You" and even Aretha Franklin's cover of "You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman," which I sang aloud to in the mornings as I styled my hair. If you had asked me then about rap music, I would have shrugged my shoulders and looked at you like you were crazy. Rap music? What's that? But then I started the seventh grade and my whole world turned upside down. At Public School 141, I went to classes with kids from all over the Bronx. There were kids whose families came from Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, and kids whose families came from Russia and China. There were kids who were African American and kids who were Irish American, kids who were Italian American, and kids who were Greek American. There were kids whose families were poor, kids whose families were well off, and kids whose families were somewhere in between. Some were Jewish and other devout Catholics. Some were Jewish and others devout Catholics. Some were Muslim. Some of the Asian kids were even Buddhist. So basically, it was just very diversified. There's all kinds of different cultures going on at Public School 141. The charge created by so many different elements coming together. I don't know why it says tiger. Sorry, I typed this up real early this morning. Coming together was palpable. The school crackled with energy, and as you can imagine, things weren't always smooth. There were some pretty entrenched cliques and a few vicious fights in the schoolyard, but there was also so much flavor. You could hear Spanish spoken with a thick New Yorkan accent to a kid wearing a yarmulke. So, New Yorkan, there's kind of a slang basically for New York, because the Bronx is in New York. And a yarmulke that's just what the head wear for Jewish men a lot of times. A seemingly reserved Asian American girl would get out of her parents' car, wait for them to drive off, and then unzip her coat to reveal a fire engine red Adidas sweatsuit. A guy in a preppy button-down shirt would sport gold chains with pendants of every denomination, the Jewish Star of David, the Arabic letter for Allah, and a shiny gold cross. He was everything. He was everything. That was his stilo, and everyone gave him props for it. So I go back to the quotation marks in the slang. Stilo, remember, that was earlier, or Walker said that earlier, and that's just a slang word for style. When I got to 141, I felt like a blank canvas. Nothing had prepared me for the dynamism, the screaming self-expression of the place and its students. For the first few weeks, I secretly studied the habits of the 7th, 8th, and 9th graders with whom I walked the halls and shared the cafeteria. I was transfixed by the way they infused their words with attitude and drama, moving their hands and heads as they spoke. I was captivated by the way many of them walked and ran and joked with each other with confidence and bravado. I noted that they wore I noted what they wore and how they wore it. The razor-sharp creases of their Jordache jeans, the spotless sneakers with the laces left loose and untied. Slowly, I began to add some of what I saw into my look. I convinced my grandmother to buy me a name chain to wear around my neck, and my stepmother to buy me dark-dyed designer jeans. I bought my first pair of Nike sneakers, red, white, and blue Air Cortezes, with money I saved from my allowance. One by one, I started to make friends. Diane, Loida, James, Jesus, Maya. When James and Jesus weren't making fun of me for being so square, slang word, they took me to parties on the Grand Concourse, the big boulevard lined with old apartment buildings and department store that ran through the Bronx. The parties were incredible, filled with young people who didn't drink, smoke, or fight, but who just wanted to dance and laugh and ooh and awe over the scratching sounds and funky beats the DJs coaxed out of their turntables. A lot of the kids at the parties were breakers or poppers and lockers, which meant they could breakdance, a style of movement that blends the Brazilian martial art of that word, capoeira, with the dance called the robot and incorporates classical dance moves as well. The breakers moved in crews that competed against each other. Standing in a circle, we watched as members of the different groups moonwalked into the center and then hurled themselves to the floor, spinning on their heads, kicking their legs into the air, and making elaborate hand gestures, each more intricate and acrobatic than the last. Everyone at the party who wasn't breaking was a judge by default, and we registered our scores by clapping and yelling. When Loida and Diane weren't capping on or making fun of my clothes, they were hipping me to Kiss 98.7 and WBLS, the radio stations that had started to slip some of the songs we liked into their rotation. Songs like Planet Rock by Soul Sonic Force and Take Me Home by Lisa Lisa and the Cold Jam. After school and on the weekends, they took me to the street vendors that sold the accessories we all coveted. The big knockoff Porsche sunglasses everybody wanted, but not everybody could afford, and the heavy gold chains people collected around their necks, like so many pieces of string. Loida and Diane also took me around the city on the bus, familiarizing me with the routes of the M1 and M3 and M7, showing me all the different neighborhoods like Little Italy and Chinatown, Bed-Stuy and Harlem. I remember looking out the big sliding glass window of the bus at the lines drawn in concrete and glass and thinking that while the world outside seemed so divided, inside, in my circle, among my friends, those lines didn't seem to exist. Loida was Dominican and Diane was Puerto Rican. Our friend Mary was Irish American and Lisa was Italian American. We were of different ages with different likes and dislikes, but we were united in our love of hip hop. We loved the dope beats, another slang word, the ever changing and ever expanding lexicon, the out part of something dynamic and fresh that was bigger than anyone in our minds. That streamed from the radio in the privacy of our bedrooms and coursed between us as we talked on the phone. That was where we lived. That was where we felt free. Looking back on it now, I can see that hip hop was born in the diversity I found at 141. Unlike the hip hop of today, I didn't come prepackaged from a marketing department with millions of dollars to spend. Our hip hop was the product of a bunch of kids from a bunch of different places trying to talk to each other, trying to create a common language that could cut through the many languages people spoke at home. Intuitively, kids were making a community where there was none. We were affirming our sameness in a world that seemed to only emphasize our differences. That desire to come together, irrespective of superficial differences and sometimes in celebration of them, was what gave hip hop authenticity. That was what kept it honest and as crucial to our well being as food. It's what kept it real. I can't say much about hip hop today, but I can say that old hip hop, original hip hop, changed my life forever. I only lived in the boogie down Bronx for a year, but those 12 months gave me so much, not gave me. Gave me so much. I learned that art could bring people together and make them forget their differences. I learned how good it could feel to move with a posse, a group of friends who had my back no matter what. I learned that I could express myself and communicate with others through what I wore and how I walked and what music I liked. I learned that it doesn't take money or a special degree to transform the grit and drive and hardness of the city into something beautiful. Loyalty, community, self confidence, creativity. Hip hop taught me more about real life than anything I learned that year in class. I hope when kids look at shiny video, I hope when kids today look at shiny videos by their favorite hip hop artists, they will see through the expensive cars and exotic locations, the women in skimpy outfits, and the men trying to approximate a gangsta lean. I hope they will remember that hip hop was born without a formula and without a lot of expensive props or violent undertones. I hope they will marvel at the fact that the early day of hip hop, young people were making it up as they went along, following their hearts, following what felt good. I hope they will think about what it takes to create a culture that is unique and transcendent and honest. And I hope they begin to dream about creating a new world for themselves. I hope hip hop inspires them to make their own revelation. All right, so this is full of a lot of slang words. You see, or you heard me make mention of them a lot. Generally, the words in quotations are slang words, words that maybe you don't know what they are, but if you were in the Bronx at the time of this, or you were just alive during the time of this, then it'd make more sense to you. But now we're finished reading it. So let's go to, where is it? There it is. I think. Yeah. So after we finish reading it, we're going to fill out this document, and it says directions after reading Before Hip Hop Was Hip Hop. Complete the following page. It would be helpful to have your main idea Google slide presentation to help you complete this. What is the main idea of Before Hip Hop Was Hip Hop? Remember, this is no more than a sentence, usually between 4 to 8 words, trying to tell us the main idea or big point that the author tried to convey through the text. And remember, in the main idea Google slides, a great way to kind of get a better understanding or a better idea of the text and its main idea is to kind of look at the title. Why did the author create that title? Why did he use this title? More times than not, the title is going to be linked to the main idea in one way or the other. So if you're ever stuck, confused, I don't know what the main idea is of something, look at the title, because it's going to have some sort of it's going to give some sort of clue about what the main idea is going to be about. And whenever you're finished with the main idea, you're going to identify 3 supporting details that help support the main idea. And how do they support the main idea? So here I'm looking for details from the story, 3 of them to be exact. But more than that, I'm also looking for a sentence after each detail explaining how they support the main idea. So that's all you're doing for Before Hip Hop Was Hip Hop. If this didn't make a lot of sense to you or you're still stuck, shoot me an email, call the school, anything. I'll be glad to help you in any way I can. But I can't know if you need help if you don't tell me. So just shoot me an email, call the school, whatever. I'll be glad to help you in any way I can. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all are having a great day.